In this video, I'll be going through how to make the McCall's pattern 8458 with view C. So view C just has the two side pockets. So first you will be cutting out your fabric, and then the step one, we want to get piece 1 and 2, pinning them right sides together. So with my fabric, it's a little tricky to see the right side from the wrong side of the fabric. So I've put little X's on the wrong side of the fabric so I get it right, because we do have a distinct left and right side here. So it's really important that we do this pinning at the same time so we can check that we have a left and a right. So we can see the curves are a mirror image. And then the area that I pinned, we're going to sew it at 5/8. So that's where my tape is. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and sew that and backstitch when you get to the end of that section. Keeping it nice and tight to the tape, reverse stitching at the end there. And we're going to do that again. So now that we have that sewn, we'll just take a look at the seam allowance. So you can see it's nice and parallel to the edge, and again that's 5/8 seam allowance. So now we'll do the exact same thing on the other leg, and I'm just noticing with my pinning that the edges kind of became unaligned, so I'm just fixing that before I put it under the presser foot and get sewing there. So a bit of rinse and repeat. So once you know how to do it on one side, it's pretty good, and you could do it again on the other side, reverse stitching at the end. So now our next step is to turn the pocket to the inside, and you can press that, and then we're going to top stitch that. So I'll take you through that minus the pressing. So here's my sewn area, and now this is the right side, and we're going to hide that seam on the inside, making a bit of a sandwich. So whether you're doing this with your fingers or the iron, you want to make sure that the seam is nice and open here, and you get as close to the stitching as possible. So lining things up and just kind of showing you the sandwich that I'm hiding the seam on the inside there. And then we'll just keep pinning. And then once we've got that pinned on both sides, we'll go ahead and sew that. Okay, so I'm really pushing to open that up and not have any little pockets or any areas that aren't even. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. So now that I have them pinned, I'm going to do one quick double check that I have a left and a right side, so we can see that the pockets are turning to the inside and I have a distinct left and right. I'm also going to pop a pin in the top there just to make sure things don't shift around while I'm sewing. And then to get ready to sew, we're going to set up the machine at the edge of the presser foot, and that's really important that we're at the edge of the presser foot with top stitching is decorative. So we really want to be super careful here to keep that stitching nice and even to the edge, because everyone's going to see this. A top stitch not only is decorative, but it also helps to secure this seam in place so that it looks nice and crisp. And I'm going to go ahead and do the top stitching on the other side. So now just to take a peek at this from the inside, we can see the pockets on the inside there. We've got a distinct left and right. And when we flip it on the other side, we can see that nice top stitching. And again, we've got a left and a right with our top stitching. So now we're ready to add the other side of the pocket on, piece number 3. So with piece number 3, we want to put it right sides together, and that's really critical. And we're matching up the curve. So there's a nice curve on there. So we're going to get curve to curve, right sides together. There also is a little notch that you can use to match those up. Okay, so one of these will be for the left pocket, one for the right, and I'm just marking a little X to note the wrong side of the fabric just to make sure I get the right orientation of these. Okay, so matching those curves, lining up the notches, and then we're going to go ahead and pin that together on that whole outer edge. So now that we have that all pinned, we're ready to sew those edges. We're going to come over to the sewing machine and we're going to line this up at the 5/8 tape and get that sewing, making sure that we reverse stitch at the beginning and at the end. So here we go, sewing along, following the curve, making sure to adjust the fabric as we go, taking out the pins as we go. And then you're going to back stitch when you get to the end of this pocket, and rinse and repeat on the other side. Now we want to baste the upper and side edges together so they don't shift on us when we go to attach the other pieces together. So we're going to make sure it's nice and flat and pin that together. So just 2 or 3 pins here will do the trick, and we're making sure all the edges are nicely aligned because that's really critical at this point. So we've got that side, and then we're going to check that it's nice and flat as we line up the edge there, and there is a notch to line up as well, so you can use that notch, pop a pin in there, and then I'm just brushing it to make sure it's nice and flat because I don't want any ripples or anything in there. And once I'm done here, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. And now that they're all pinned, we're ready to baste across the top and baste along the sides. So when we baste, we want to change up our settings to our width to 3, stitch is 1 for straight, and stitch length is 4. When we're basting, we line up with the edge of the presser foot, and we just need to baste along those little areas that we pin together. So we're going to carefully get that under, line up with the edge of the presser foot, get that presser foot down, and I'm just getting that thread out of the way, and I'm going to go ahead and sew. Now typically with basting we do not reverse stitch. I think I accidentally reverse stitch here, but that's okay. So in both pants, you're doing that top section and the side seam. So just being careful to keep it at the edge of the presser foot, no need to backstitch, and then you are good to go. So the next step, things start getting exciting. We're gonna do the side seam. So this is what the front side is, so that's our right side. And we've just basted those, and then that's the inside or the wrong side of the fabric where we can see the pocket. So let's start with one leg here. So we're going to start with the front of the pant leg face up, and then we're going to grab one of the back pant legs and put it right sides together. So again, you may want to quickly put an X to mark the right side from the wrong side, and that may be really helpful. So I put a little X there, and then we're going to line up the side seam. So the side seam's the same side that has the pocket, and we're going to line up the top and the bottom, put those top and bottom pins in. When you're sewing, and when you're pinning, it's always good to start at the top as opposed to the bottom, because you want that waistline to look really nice and to be nice and even. At the bottom, if the hem is a little uneven, it's really easy to modify that and fix it. Otherwise, if you have the slack at the top, it can make things pretty wonky. So just to keep that in mind, you've got a notch there to line up as well. Okay, so once you get one side all pinned together, you're ready to switch over to the other leg and do the same thing. And just notice that the pants don't line up. That's okay on the scoop side or the crotch. That's intentional. The front side of our body is a different size than the back side, so the front and the back sides of the legs are slightly different. Okay, so now we're going to sew a seam, so we got to switch our stitching back to 313. We are going to use the 5/8 tape, line it up, and get sewing. So it's just going to be one long straight row of stitching, so we're going to go ahead and sew that on both pants. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and sew the inseam together, and you'll notice that these line up now. So one side is going to be a little wider than the other side, and that's okay. So we've sewn this left side, and now we can see there's quite a gap between the two, but that's okay. We're going to pick it up and line up those edges so that they match exactly. So we're going to match those exactly, get those pins in, and pin all the way down that straight leg and do the same thing on both sides. So this is going to be one pant leg, and then the other one will be the other pant leg. So continuing on pinning here on the other leg, keeping the edges nice and even. And then sewing at 5/8. So make sure you backstitch or reverse stitch, and we're going to start at the top. So notice those scoops, those go to the top. So reverse stitching here, had some random pin there, reverse stitching, and off we go to the races, sewing a nice straight line all the way down to the bottom and making sure to reverse stitch at the end. So we'll speed things up here because by now I hope we know how to sew a nice straight line, but just to show you the process. So again, another 5/8 on the other leg, and here we go. Gotta love fast forward. Okay, so now we're going to be able to do the crotch. So for the crotch, one leg goes inside out, and we're going to line it up right sides together so you're able to sew that big U, and you'll have those notches to line up as well. So here I go in real life. This is the top of one of the legs. I'm turning it inside out. And then I'm gonna hold my thumb and finger at the top of the crotch, and then I'm gonna shove that inside the other leg here, and be mindful that is the top of the crotch on the other leg, because we want to go center crotch to center crotch. So you just want to keep those lined up. We've got right sides together, two nice seams there together, and we're gonna pop a pin in that. And then as we pin it, we'll notice we're going to be able to create a bit of a U shape. Now, we're going to sew this at 5/8. After we sew, we're going to sew it again. And that's because crotches receive is a high stress point of the pants. So if you don't like holes in your crotches, which I don't think most people do, then adding some extra stitching there is really helpful to ensure or delay getting a hole in the crotch. Okay, so I'm just pinning along here and lining up the notches, making sure everything lines up nicely. So you can see a nice U shape there, and then we're just going to go ahead and sew that at 5/8. So making sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end, and then we're going to come back and reinforce the crotch. All right, so to reinforce the crotch, we're going to sew again, this time at the edge of the presser foot and adding a second seam. So I'm right here at the center of the crotch, and then I'm just marking with a couple pins a few inches away, maybe like a hand width away. And then I'm going to start even just a little bit further, just because I really don't want a hole. So I'm at the edge of the presser foot, and then I'm going to reverse stitch and then sew through that whole area, making it nice and strong. If you want to, you can go over this area a second time. No issues. This is definitely an important spot to keep nice and secure. Okay, and this is what it looks like. You can see that second line of sewing, a little higher on one side than the other, but it's whatever. It's all good. So now we can turn it right sides out, and it should look like pants, which is a pretty exciting moment. And then we're going to move on to the waistband. So that's the last two pieces we have. They're in rectangles. There's a little notch in each side. So we're going to start by pinning that notch and then pin that whole side. So on one side of the waistband is really simple. We're going to sew from side to side there, just the little skinny end. And then we get to the other side, we do need to leave a gap to make it easy to put our elastic band in. So I'm going to start by lining up my notch again, making sure, and again, this is right sides together, just FYI, we're 99% of the time we work right sides together, and we want to get that notch lined up. So get the pin in there and pin that. And then I'm going to take a little piece of chalk just to show you where I'm going to sew. You can use the chalk, or you can use pins to remind yourself, or if you happen to have a light colored fabric, you can even use a washable fabric marker if you want to mark where you're going to sew. All right, so I'm folding in half just to kind of see where my halfway point is. And then I want to sew a little bit past the halfway point, and then I want to sew at the bottom. All right, so if you have your piece of elastic, you want to leave an opening big enough for that elastic and just to have a gap to slide it through. Now the elastic can fold, so if you happen to go slightly narrower, it's not the end of the world. So like I said, the first side is really simple. We're going to go ahead and sew that, making sure we reverse stitch at the beginning and the end. And then the second side, we want to leave that gap. So we're going to be mindful, we're going to watch our chalk or a marker, and then when we get to the end of that little section, we're going to reverse stitch. And then from there, we're going to take our needle out, lift up our presser foot, pop over to the other side, and get ready to sew that last little bit. So we're leaving a gap, getting that presser foot back down, and then we're going to sew and reverse stitch. Now I kind of overshoot it here on my reverse stitching, so I ended up having to take a little bit of that out. So now that's sewn, you can see the little gap there. Should be big enough for your elastic to go through. You're going to open up the seam allowance, fold it in half, wrong sides together, pop a pin in there. Do the same thing on the other side. So imagine that's your north and south. Then you want to hit your east and west. So give it a tug, find the center, walk your hands to the center, pop a pin in there, making sure the edges of the fabric line up precisely. So keep going till you've got a good amount of pins in there, roughly a hand width apart after you hit your north, south, east, and west. Once you've completed all of that, you're ready to baste it together. So we're going to follow these settings 314 to set up the machine for basting, and then we're going to set it up to sew at the edge of the presser foot. So go ahead and sew all the way around. Then once you're done, you're able to attach the waistband to the pants. So the first thing is to find the center of the pants, of the front, and we know the center has the pockets. So you find that, and then the center of the waistband that has the hole in it. Now we want that part face up and the solid side that doesn't have a hole towards the pants, which are slipping away on me for some reason. Okay, so I'm pinning those together, lining up the seams really nicely here, getting the pin in. So after pinning the front, we're going to pin the center back, lining up the seams. And then we're going to go to that idea of the north, south, east, west principle. Now now that I've got the front and the back, I'm going to fold it in half and find the center, and that's going to give me my east or my west. And then we're going to find the center, match that to the side seam, which is roughly at that east, and do the same thing on the other side. And that will help to equally distribute it. So just keep pinning along the way, keeping the edges of all three layers lined up really nicely, and get that pinned in, ready to sew it all together. So our previously basting helps us not to have so many layers that could possibly slip. So it's kind of like pinning 2 layers of fabric together rather than 3, or in this case at the pocket, we have quite a few layers with the pocket and the waistband. So once it's all pinned, then we're going to go back to sewing a seam, 313, line it up with the tape. We're going to reverse stitch at the beginning and sew till we go all the way around. All right, so goes all the way around and taking out those pins along the way, keeping things safe. So now that we've basically got this sewn together, we have a little space to hold the waistband, which can also be called a casing. So we need to measure out our elastic to fit in the casing. So you're going to grab your elastic, fit it around your waist, and make sure that you have a little bit of an overlap, and then mark that with your thumb so you have a solid few centimeters overlap. And then take that spot and then cut there. And then you know that's a good size for your waist. Then we're gonna go ahead and put that in. Now I don't have a bodkin, but bodkin would be the best thing. You can just old school it and use a big safety pin. Doesn't have to be as big as this. Whatever you choose, you're gonna slide it through that hole that we created. You're gonna slide, 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 and then grab onto that pin or bodkin and slide it through. So shimmy it through your fabric, filling that pin or the bodkin, and then pulling. So do that till you come all the way around and come back to that initial hole. And then you're going to grab that end of the elastic. Now it's really important to make sure there's no twists in the elastic, because our next step is to be attaching it. So you're going to check that out and get ready to sew that together. But before you do, it would be a really good idea to try on your pants. Make sure that sometimes elastic kind of stretches on you, so you want to make sure that it 100% fits. So once you're happy with the size, you can trim it if need be, and then you're going to cut in a box shape and then a little X in the center. So you're going to come over to your sewing machine and then put your needle right into both layers of the elastic and sew that. So you'll notice that you can't even see the pants, so I've made sure I pulled it out enough that it's really easy to work with here, so it's no big deal. Okay, so just make sure you pivot on the corners, and that makes life a lot easier to sew and not have any problems with strength. So here I am about to go on the last part of the X and finishing that off. After that's attached, you're going to slide your elastic band all the way in, and at the end you might need to give it just a little extra help to push it in. Now you want to try on your pants and check the length. If you need a big hem, you may need to trim off some excess fabric. So we're going to switch to zigzags 424, line up with the edge of the presser foot, and then get those zigzags on there. So the zigzag is there to help the fabric from fraying. The other option is to fold it under like the official pattern says, but this I think is a little faster. So make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end and go all the way around the bottom of each pant length. Again, after you have checked the length on your body and adjusted it if you need to trim any off. And when you're done the one pant leg, you're going to move over and do the other pant leg. I didn't film that because it's pretty straightforward. after you have all your zigzags in, then we're going to use our seaming gauge and fold. I'm setting at 3/4 of an inch, and we're going to fold our hem up and pin it. So I always go back to that north, south, east, west principle on the seams. Those parts you know you're turning up straight. And one kind of little cheat or hack here with the pants that are have this design with the lines on it, you can also use that as a way to help line things up. So measuring and pinning all the way around, hitting your north, south, east, west, and filling in, and then getting ready to sew. When you're done pinning both legs, you're going to switch over to sewing straight 3-1-3, lining up with the tape of 5/8, getting that all sewn, making sure you backstitch at the end. And then once you do it on both legs, you are done. Congratulations.